Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. It is Monday, July 14th. It is 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Admissions Live. I'm your host, Chris Dorso, and today on the show we are talking about something a little more serious, a little heavier than is sort of our typical fare here on Admissions Live. But it's something that is definitely affecting college students today. It's something that I'm sure for all of you enrollment folks has come up a lot as you are talking with prospective students and their families, and there's no better time to talk about it than right now. And we will talk with Time Magazine's Eliza Gray, who had the cover story on Time Magazine just a few weeks ago, Rape, the Crisis in Higher Education, and we will talk with her about everything that's going on. There was an incredible report released last week by Senator Claire McCaskill about what colleges are doing or not doing, as the case may be, about how we are reporting statistics, and there's a lot to cover, and so we will get to that in just a minute. But first, Admissions Live is a part of the Higher Ed Live network. We are a series of professional development web shows and podcasts, always free and accessible to you in our archives at higheredlive.com and on iTunes. Be a part of our broadcast by tuning in live here and sharing your insights and questions using the Higher Ed Live hashtag on Twitter. And you can receive weekly updates with live show dates and times by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter, and that is again at higheredlive.com. Today's show would not be possible without the support of all of my colleagues here at Stony Brook, as well as all of our friends at M. Stoner. All of our Higher Ed Live shows, including Admissions Live, are produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with educational institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. This month, M. Stoner is hosting an in-depth two-part webinar series focused on how colleges and universities can offer program, major, and degree pages that don't suck, because quite frankly, that's what it really comes down to. These are the products our institutions offer, and yet many degree pages on .edu sites are long, lackluster, and lifeless. And so we are going to shoot out a link that you can learn more and you can register for M. Stoner's webinar series. One thing clear, I cannot get enough of our sponsors, and we have a brand new sponsor this month. As enrollment management continues to develop as a profession, Abilene Christian University has addressed the need for an academic credential to help you set yourself apart. Designed to be completed in 10 to 12 months, ACU's online graduate certificate in enrollment management provides mastery of the profession in a flexible format for working professionals. And you can learn more at acu.edu/enrollment management. And you can also hit them at ACU.edu on Twitter. Do you know if students are leaving your college visit with inspiration, not just information? I know ours do. A Welcome to College Visit audit will reveal what your visitors are hearing and what they should be hearing, speaking of things that students should be asking, questions that families should be asking. Contact Justin Baer via Twitter at welcome2college, welcome to college, or email him at welcometocollege.com for more information. And finally, did you know that the Chegg Cloud, which includes sites like College Prowler, US News, Princeton Review, University TV, and Zinch.com, receives over 1.3 million visitors researching college information a month? Learn how you can reach those students who are actively researching college information at the height of their interest. Email clientsuccess@chegg.com or tweet @socialadmission for details, and Chegg, of course, CHEGG. So I mentioned Senator Claire McCaskill, Senator from Missouri, released a study last week, and we will tweet out that link in just a second, that basically says that the way that college campuses are handling sexual assaults on campus is not just a problem, but actually may be breaking federal law. And my guest today is Eliza Gray from Time Magazine, who has been following the story, and as I said, cover story May 26th issue of Time, entitled, again, Rape, the Crisis in Higher Education. So welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So I know it is sort of it's dangerous to oversimplify this whole issue into a 20-minute show, but so what's happening right now in higher education that we should be aware of?
I mean, basically, this issue of sexual assault on college campuses has been going on for really a number of years now, decades even. I think the reason we're hearing about it a lot right now is that the White House has taken a really active role in this, and the Department of Education has basically said they sent out a letter to colleges and they've said that if you do not protect your students against sexual assault, if you don't take active steps to handle this problem, that's a violation of Title IX, which I would assume most of your listeners know is kind of the federal law against discriminating against people on the basis of gender in college. And the idea.
Most of us know of Title IX from an athletics perspective, but right. I think it is broader than just you need to have women's sports in addition to men's sports. It covers a great deal more than just the athletics piece.
Right, exactly. And so what the White House and the Obama administration is saying is that actually, failing to handle sex harassment and sexual assault on college campuses is a violation of Title IX. And so that's why you're seeing so much talk about this, because the White House has said that the Department of Education is actively investigating a number of schools, and a grassroots group of female students are sort of saying, filing complaints, federal complaints, saying, this can't stand anymore. And now you have, as you said, Senator McCaskill and other senators trying to come up with legislation that might make this thing better. So I think, what's new about this is sort of the reaction to it, not kind of the problem, which I think is really age old.
Yeah, I think that's a crucial point. This is not sexual assault on college campuses is not something that just started happening.
Right.
That has sadly always been around. And it's, as much as I said, it's a heady topic and it's not something that's easy to talk about. It's something that's important to talk about, and something that isn't going to get better unless we do talk about it and try to make the necessary changes both in policy and procedures, but in how we talk about it and how it's something we need to really openly discuss. So let's talk a little bit about Senator McCaskill's roundtable and her report from last week, and I have that here as well, and we will tweet out this link as well. The full report with all of the tables and everything is extraordinarily long, but the actual text is only about 12 pages, and it's absolutely worth reading. It is eye-opening, to say the least. There's an incredible wealth of data that is in here about what colleges are doing, what colleges are not doing. And again, the stat that comes out from the report, the one that really sort of made the rounds last week, biggest was the stat that 1 in 5 women, according to the report, has been the victim of attempted or completed sexual violence in college. And considering that a large percentage of the incidents go unreported entirely, how much credence can we really put in that 1 in 5 number? So without sugarcoating it, universities are required to report data. Every one of us has a Clery report linked somewhere, hopefully prominently on our website, where students and families can look at the actual report data from your particular school. And if you're not familiar with that, you really should be. So the question really comes in, if the data that we're reporting, that we're legally obligated to report, isn't right, what does that say? What are we doing there?
So there's a couple things going on that you mentioned. So just sort of break some of those things down. The 1 in 5 statistic comes from a survey called the Campus Sexual Assault Survey that was funded by the federal government in 2007 and looked at 2 big state schools and surveyed thousands of students at those schools. And that number, so that's the stat that they're working off of there. But actually, that stat has been found in many similar studies over the years. So there's a lot of criticism, to be honest. I mean, we could get really in the weeds here. I mean, there's been some conservatives that have come out and really criticized that study. But in fact, I really believe that the numbers are fairly solid given how often that's been sort of refound over the years. And what you'll find, and what admissions officers are going to find, and what parents are going to find, and students are going to find, is that the number of reports that are made by colleges don't come anywhere near those numbers. So that means a couple of different things. I mean, it means on point one, a lot of these college women are not reporting them. So, the 1 in 5 numbers based on an anonymous survey, that's what women are saying, and men, and some men are saying in response to surveys. They're saying this happened to me. But in terms of what they're actually reporting to campus or to the police, those numbers are widely different. And so there's that issue. But then there's also that the schools themselves are not reporting probably accurately the reports in general. So the Center for Public Integrity a couple years ago did a great analysis of this that sort of found that a number of schools are sort of classifying different kinds of rapes in different ways. So if it happened off campus at a fraternity party, they weren't including it. If it happened between a boyfriend and a girlfriend, they weren't including it, which is just not, that's not acceptable, and it's not appropriate given the guidelines of the law, but that's something that a lot of schools are doing. So those are a couple of the reasons why you're seeing a big disparity. What Claire McCaskill found is that a number of schools were reporting 0 incidents. And that's impossible, right? Obviously, you could quibble with the 1 in 20 number. You could say, 1 in 5, you could say it was 1 in 50. But, if a major state university doesn't report 0 numbers, you can be pretty sure that that's wrong, right? That's not right. So there's that, but an even more shocking thing I thought that Claire McCaskill found was that even that a lot of the schools also investigated fewer cases than they reported, meaning that they openly admitted to just not investigating a couple of incidents that happened on their campus, and that is against the law. That's against federal law. So, schools are were admitting in that survey to be in violation of what the guidelines are federally.
I can understand, and there's no way this comes out right, but I can understand, but I know why schools would underreport. Anybody who works anywhere near an administrative office in higher ed knows about rankings and knows about perceptions and knows about all of those things. And so I can, again, there's no right way to say this, but I can see why schools would sort of do that on the reporting end. I can't imagine why, for the sake of humanity, you would not investigate in the proper way. That doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense to me. And there was a story that hit yesterday. Was it? Yeah, it was this weekend. This weekend's New York Times. Yeah. We're not going to name schools, but there was a story from a campus that did not investigate properly and did not report properly. And this is, to go beyond the numbers. It's very easy to get lost in the numbers and say, oh, well, it's 1 in 5, but it's not really that, or it's more than that, or whatever it is. But it's not necessarily about the numbers. There was a quote. Where did my quote that I saw went? From Andrea Botner, who is the former director of the Office of International Women's Issues under the George W. Bush administration. Quote, 1 in 5 doesn't bother me too much as a statistic, she said. Quote, frankly, I think it's the wrong statistic to be focused on. The number that comes to my mind is 60%. 60% of rapes in this country are never reported. And to me, every time a victim comes forward, I imagine 2 more next to him or her who don't. Those are the people we need to reach. And so I think the importance of having the right reporting, not just reporting structures, but also investigative structures in process, so very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. A number of things there that you mentioned. First of all, it's important for anyone who's watching who's an admissions counselor to know that there's been a pretty strong effort on the part of people like Claire McCaskill and journalists like myself to let people know that if you are underreporting, that's the bad sign. So in fact, I don't know if this is penetrating to parents, but I'm certainly trying to get it out in my stories that if you see a number that is 0, that is the school to worry about, not the school that says 300. Because the school who says 300, that means that they've created an environment where students feel like they can come forward and that they're at least making an effort to actually document all of these things. And so that's actually, if I were a parent and I was taking my kid to look at schools, I would be more encouraged by a higher number than a lower one, as counterintuitive as that sounds. And I do think that message is going to start to get out. I mean, the second thing is that George W. Bush person that you just quoted, the numbers are actually even lower than that for college students. Something like only 12% of college students ever report the crimes to the police. So it's actually really small in the college context. And in terms of, why colleges don't investigate, they don't because it's easier for them to let it to try to see if they can make it go away. If they investigate, then they're sort of then they get caught up in it and it becomes a big problem. And I think one way to think about this issue in terms of admissions officers, I would highly recommend, it sounds like no one wants to name any schools here, but I would highly recommend, looking up, if maybe you want to tweet out the link to this New York Times story, but this particular school, I would think would be great for admissions officers to read this and think about it from a different lens, which is that, the standard that colleges are supposed to operate under when they make these decisions for adjudication of, expelling a student, really are supposed to be preponderance of evidence, not beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Which is our criminal standard. Beyond a reasonable doubt, you have to be found guilty, and the reason for that is because you're going to jail, right? Now, the reason for a lower standard is a college saying, we don't want you on our campus. Right? We're not going to put you in jail. You can go be on another campus if you want, but we don't like the way you behave, and therefore we don't want you on our campus. And colleges have a really wide right to do that. And as admissions officers, you know that in part you're trying to pick students that you think are going to be good citizens in addition to smart students and good athletes. And so I think when you read that story, for me, what makes me wonder is, why would a college want those students to be on that campus, given what happened there? Whether or not they could prove that it was rape beyond a reasonable doubt and therefore they should be put in jail, there seemed to be enough evidence there to indicate that those people were behaving in a way that you wouldn't want in a small liberal arts college like that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, or really anywhere else, to be completely honest. And I know that, on the being part of the State University of New York system here, there's a question on the application. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? Have you ever, faced any disciplinary proceedings, anything along those lines? And the answer to those questions then sort of inform what we do on the admissions end. We look at police reports, we'll look at reports from student affairs officers. If there's an issue at play that will impact the way that our campus life operates, we're under a lot of obligation to make sure we're aware of that. And there are legal and ethical issues to making sure you're full disclosure on applications, and that opens up a whole other issue actually. I do want to I want to highlight, we did get a tweet from Kelly Lalonde, who used my quote, "I can understand why schools wouldn't report, and that's why rape culture exists." And it's true. It's absolutely true, which is why I said there's no real easy there is no positive spin on it. But knowing that is why schools do what they do, that is why rape culture exists the way it does. Very, very good point. So thank you, Kelly, for your thoughts. Another stat that came out of the McCaskill report was that, speaking of reporting, 30% of schools allow athletics departments to investigate incidents involving athletes. Now, I don't want to make too many assumptions, but I would think a victim would be somewhat less likely to report if they knew that it was going to be investigated by someone who potentially had a vested interest in the success of that athlete.
Sure. I mean, I can't actually really imagine any circumstance in which a woman would want to come forward, or a man, again, a student would want to come forward with a sexual assault allegation if they knew that that it was going to be the athletic department that was going to be dealing with it. Especially because in all of the news stories, athletic departments have had a pretty notoriously weak response to dealing with these issues.
You hate to generalize, but you do hear it a lot about athletes. You hear a lot about Greek organizations and things like that. It's where a lot of it comes from, admittedly.
Yeah. I mean, I should say that, I think most victim advocates would be really quick to remind people that it is a generalization, and that, of course, these things happen with all different types of students, partly because, you don't want to blame it on one group, and also you don't want to create the sense that like, oh, it only happens at fraternities, and that's certainly not the case. What I was sort of more referring to is that, you know, when athletic departments do have to deal with these issues, I think the response is often, I mean, Penn State, perfect example. The response is often,
Yeah, true.
and that's not far afield from this. That's in the same category of things that's going on, right? There's this kind of desire to sort of keep the coaches and keep everybody protected. So yeah, I mean, I think that's outrageous, and I think Claire McCaskill was really right to point that out. I think she probably pointed to that because it was similar in a lot of ways to the way the military has been handling these issues, which is something that she's kind of also had an expertise in. So I think, yes, absolutely. I don't think athletic departments. I don't think it makes sense for them to be in charge of dealing with these issues.
So, why is college the focus here? I mean, it seems obvious. I mean, you've got underage people, you've got all living together without parents involved, likely the influence of alcohol and other substances. Obviously, this goes beyond college. Why the focus, you think, specifically on higher ed, and why now?
Well, I think all of the reasons you mentioned are right. Women between the age of 16 and 24 are going to be the most likely to be sexually assaulted or raped. Again, that does not mean that women outside of those age groups don't, but that's going to be the most common. And so already at college, you're in the highest risk pool, right? But actually, women in college of that same age group are also more likely to be victims than women of the same age group who are not in college. So college does seem to create this sort of like perfect storm of things that you described, sort of a binge drinking culture, away from home, young students, and also just quite frankly, a lot of young people in one place, all living in one close proximity, regardless of all those other things. So I think that that's sort of what's driving it. As to why they're focusing, you know, that the White House is focusing on this issue, I think it's partly because they have what they believe to be legal avenues in place to try to improve this. And, you know, this is something that's rampantly happening at, you know, in institutions. And so then there's a question of, well, can the institutions do something about it, right?
I was muted. Oh, there I am. Yeah, right. Sorry about that. I muted myself. So yeah, absolutely, unquestionably. And I think again, it from an enrollment perspective, you know, the talking about it now, it benefits everybody along the process. And you know, talking about not just college students but high school students as well. The more we address it at the college level, you know, so much of high school these days is about, you know, getting into college and taking that next step. And this really will inform what happens in high school, at least hopefully it will anyway. I mean, should we be as worried, more worried, differently worried for high school students?
We should be just as worried for them. I think one point I'll make that's not really an answer to this, but I think could be useful for some admissions officers. I mean, one thing we haven't really broken down here is you know, the crime stats. You mentioned before we went live here that, you know, this is something that's very important to prospective students and parents. They're going to ask about the crime stats. Traditionally, when people ask and parents think about those types of things, I think they're often thinking about the blue light system. Like, do you have a blue light system? Do you have like a special shuttle that will take people home when it's late at night? And those are the types of things that sort of schools feel comfortable chatting about, okay?
Yes,
those are
absolutely
irrelevant to this problem. I'm sorry, but it's just
Wait, all right. So how is that irrelevant to this problem? And I'm just coming at this from what do you mean? That's what we talk about. We talk about safety.
Assaults are just not happening in that way. It's really, really, really unlikely that you're going to be. And again, for anyone who's watching for whom this has happened to, I mean, it's horrible if that scenario does happen to you. What I'm saying is that it's not likely, really, at most of these colleges, for somebody to jump out of the bushes when there's not enough good lighting and rape somebody. It doesn't happen that often. What does happen is most women who respond to these surveys, most women were raped, quite frankly, in fraternity houses, in their own dorms, in a dorm, in a college dorm room. That's where this is happening. happening. So, but one thing I would caution admissions officers, while the parents may not understand this, I can tell you high school students do understand that. They do understand that rape is happening between kids who know each other. They're not stupid. I got calls from from high school students who wanted to talk about how they could talk about rape culture in their high school classrooms. So they're very aware of this issue and they're really paying attention to it. And when they go on that tour, their parents may not get it, but they're going to get it. They're going to get that this blue light talk is not really at issue. So I do think we need to worry about high school students. A lot of high school students also are sexually assaulted. They, as I mentioned, that 16 to 24 range, people who are in high school are certainly at risk for sexual assault. And for whatever reason, and I don't know the answer, but I did also see in the stats that people who've been sexually assaulted in high school are more likely to be victims in college, and I really don't know the reasons for that, but I do think that that's something that's relevant, and certainly it's important. I'm sure you have prospective students who may have experienced some of these issues, and they may be looking for a college that's going to treat them in a safe way. But I think the bottom line is, for colleges, I do think structurally, and this is a much bigger issue than we can tackle here, but I think we're going to need to, as a culture, we're going to need to start working on these issues a lot earlier than college, because it's really late to start talking about healthy sexual relationships, in freshman year in college.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
It needs to start earlier. And it's a lot to ask, quite frankly, of colleges to be responsible for creating that environment whole cloth with a bunch of 18-year-olds that just arrived. It should start with educators much earlier.
Yeah, very good point. So how do we address the blue light question then? I mean we talk about the blue lights and the walk service and the ride service and all those kinds of things. I mean, what should we be talking about when we're talking with prospective students and their families? How do we address these kinds of questions when a parent says, is your campus safe? How do we address that without resorting to sort of the trite blue light kinds of things? What should we be doing?
Well, of course, it depends on your campus. So I hope you've got a campus that's doing some good stuff. I think in New York system has just done a big overhaul with the Obama administration. So I'm sure things at the New York State level are actually, moving in the right direction here. But basically, you should talk about the things on campus that facilitate healthy sexual relationships. You should say, oh, well, we have this great bystander intervention program here, where, for example, the University of New Hampshire has a bystander intervention program. So does the University of Montana, where they're sort of training kids to kind of look for the signs. Somebody looks too drunk and they're going up the stairs. Does the student come in and say, whoa, 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 stop? Like you read in that New York Times story, not everyone's read it, but I think it's worth reading. There could have been a lot of people in this scenario that happened there, which was sort of a really horrific gang rape situation. There were a lot of bystanders in that situation that might have been able to step in and stop that from happening, right? So a lot of schools are working on trying to do that. So maybe if you're an admissions officer at a school that has a program like that, you should definitely talk about that. I honestly think talking about it rather than shying away from it is better. The University of Kentucky's president has been really open about this. So he's one example to look at. He talks about this issue a lot. And I honestly think that plays well with prospective students and parents. I think it makes them feel like, wow, you're really admitting that this is a problem and taking it head on instead of pretending that it doesn't happen. So I think talking about, maybe your school has an orientation program that talks about healthy sexual relationships during the first week. And if that's the case, then maybe talk a little bit about that program and what it teaches.
Yeah, I think that again comes back to really changing the culture of it, and it not just being about the stats, but being about what students can actually do. The Red Watch Band program for alcohol abuse, for example, is a program that again goes into that sort of bystander intervention kind of an aspect. So very, very important. And you had a story a couple weeks ago that talked about the rise in reports, and you even said it earlier. You don't trust a school that has 0 in that number. You want a school that has, again, this comes out wrong. You want a school that has a lot of reported the incidents are happening. You want to know that they're being reported. You want to know that something's being done. You want to know that the culture is such that it's not accepted. Is that something will be done, and that it's not just going to be pushed under the rug.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So we're running short on time, so I guess I want to thank you so much for this discussion. But what's your advice to students and parents as going through the process? What should students and parents be asking? Not just, is the campus safe? What should they want to know?
I mean, I think students and parents should, I don't want to blame fraternities as we talked about earlier, but I do think students and parents should ask questions about the social life at the school. Is this a school where the only real social engagements are run by all male fraternities? And if that's the case, that might be okay, but you might want to ask a little bit about that and what the other alternatives are for sort of fun, and really talk about with your child kind of how they want to have fun when they get to campus. And I think certain schools have different social dynamics, and I think that you can explore that when you're going through the admissions process. So I think that's one thing you could talk about. And I think look at the crime statistics. If you see a really low statistic, then ask why it's so low, and read up on what you've seen at schools and ask those questions, even if it's about a different school that's similar to the one you're looking at. Ask, don't be afraid to sort of bring it up. It's a tough issue, but challenge administrators on it and see how they respond. See if they're open or if they seem really closed. And I think that can give you another sense of like, what's the culture here at this school? Are they going to be the kind of culture that's going to want to change, or are they going to want to be sweeping this under the rug?
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank Eliza Gray from Time Magazine for joining me on the show this afternoon. I know it's a heady topic, but it's something that everybody, students, parents, administrators, we all need to talk about on the student affairs side, on the enrollment side, on the counseling side, and we need to work hard to change the language and to really change the culture. And I hope we stimulated a little bit of discussion and hopefully a lot more thought in that. So with that, Admissions Live will be back next week. We're off schedule this week with my co-host, Nicole Lentini. Thanks, as always, to our sponsors, M. Stoner and Chegg and ACU and Welcome to College. And coming up next on Higher Ed Live is Advancement Live, Tuesday, tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern. And host Andrew Gosson will speak with Devin Mathias from Martz and Lundy and Rebecca Branlett from UNC. And they will look at annual fund trends and performance in the fiscal year 2014. And they will look ahead at upcoming opportunities and challenges. Get reminders, as always, about this and other great shows by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. Browse the archives at higheredlive.com or subscribe to the Higher Ed Live podcast on iTunes. I'm Chris Dorso. Thanks for watching. Back next month with more from Admissions Live.